Nuclear-Free Virginia Richmond chapter is at screening of Pandora's Promise at the Network Theater in Norfolk, Virginia on Wednesday, July the 24th, 2013, with the only screening of the Pandora's Promise in Virginia in Norfolk, 1507 Coley Avenue in Norfolk, Virginia.
Stop the Nuke con job. We're here at the Nara Cinema in Norfolk, Virginia to be the opposition to this movie, this pro-nuke propaganda movie that's showing. It's been showing across the United States. From what we hear, it's been a poor showing. Probably because most people already believe that nuclear energy is not safe, it's expensive, it's dangerous, and dirty. Talk to you soon.
Name while you're here.
My name is Joelle Boley, and I am here because I've been working against lifting the ban on the uranium mining in our state since I went to Virginia Beach to the Science Academy's presentation. I've been in Western Virginia to their meetings that they've had there, and I've been to Richmond to talk to my delegates regarding this, and a lot of people worked very hard and spent a lot of time because this is extremely important to this state because of the danger of it, and I just want the people to be aware that they aren't through, and we need to get together again and fight them hard.
Who is your delegate?
My delegate is Linwood Lewis, yes.
What is his position on nuclear uranium mining?
He was against it. I met with him here first, and then we went to Richmond. He was against it. And Senator Northam, we met with him, and he was against it. And we went up there, and that wasn't the case with everybody, but I did my bit to spread the horror around to the movie people that were there lobbying that we were getting ready to get uranium mining next to our water supply, which they weren't crazy about. But I figured they should know these things in this state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Crandall. I live in Norfolk. I'm here tonight because I'm strictly opposed to nuclear power in the civilian world. I did 20 years in the Navy in a program that was well run by engineers. I don't trust anything outside of the military because it's run by bean counters who have no idea the problems involved with nuclear power. And that includes general operation and mining. And that is a particular danger to us folks here in Hampton Roads. We get a lot of our water from Lake Gaston, which if they mine up that way could contaminate some of our water supply. Whether it contaminates it to a level that it's dangerous or not is immaterial. The very idea will affect how people look at our area and whether they come here to enjoy the Hampton Roads and beaches and stuff.
How bad effect would the mining have in this area?
I don't think it would have any effect if it didn't have a problem, but I believe it will have a problem because no uranium mining facility in this country and the attendant refining facilities has not turned into a Superfund cleanup site. So it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Thank you.
I mean, at first, I'm Ken Nero, for those who are not familiar with the Nero or Wednesday nights. I talked to Glenn Besa and Eileen here with the Sierra Club, and they were not real excited about showing a pro-nuclear movie. And I think we just had to show it. But I know that our core audience isn't here tonight, unfortunately.
About a 10-minute critique rebuttal. You know, I like a challenge. You've just watched an hour and a half or whatever of well-funded, distilled, pro-nuclear propaganda. And I've got 10 minutes to rebut it, so no time to waste. What I thought I'd do is just mention a couple books that really have helped me frame my thoughts on the climate crisis and nuclear power's role or lack thereof in addressing it. They're both publications of an institute in Tacoma Park, Maryland, where we are also based beyond nuclear. They're about a half block up the street from us. The Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, which is led by Dr. Arjun Makajani, who's a member of the American Physical Society, a fellow, which is a rare honor to be awarded. One of the books came out in 2006. It's entitled Insurmountable Risks, and the subtitle is The Dangers of Using Nuclear Power to Combat Global Climate Change. It was written by Dr. Bryce Smith, who was staff scientist at the time at IEER. The first couple chapters show how nuclear power is a non-starter as a climate solution. It's astronomically expensive, and it takes too long. So the climate crisis will come and go, and nuclear will not even show up at the starting gate. And in addition to that, the expense. I mean, a typical new reactor, like the ones being built in South Carolina and Georgia right now, the first new reactors ordered since 1978. And in fact, the last successful order, which actually got built and operated in this country for an atomic reactor, was placed in October of 1973, 40 years ago. It took 23 years to build that plant at Watts Bar, Tennessee. All the rest of the orders that came in between 73 and 78 got canceled at various stages of construction or just blueprints. So those were the first two chapters, and the rest of the book was devoted to what the title said, Insurmountable Risks, the things that nuclear power has not been able to solve in over a half century, despite massive subsidization by taxpayers and ratepayers. The top of the list for the Institute and for us is nuclear weapons proliferation. Anywhere that nuclear power goes, nuclear weapons are a half step behind. You don't have to take it from me. Take it from the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammed El-Baradei, before he retired from his position with his Nobel Peace Prize in hand for his good work against the Iraq War, for one thing, and against the impending still war with Iran. That's why he got the Nobel Peace Prize. His point was that the 13 Arab countries that are very interested in nuclear power at this time are interested because they want a pathway to the bomb. They may not pursue that pathway to the bomb, but if you have a nuclear power program, you have a pathway to the bomb. Uranium enrichment, you enrich the uranium to a highness level, it is bomb grade. Plutonium reprocessing high-level radioactive waste and extracting the plutonium is a second pathway to the bomb. All you have to do, once you have those technologies, is decide to use them in that way, and off you go. So that dismissive comment at the end of the film by Richard Rhodes that, well, only less than 10 countries have developed nuclear weapons, even though there's 40 more that are ready to go if they wanted to, that's a very dangerous position to take. North Korea has shown that when they were put on the Axis of Evil list as an afterthought by the Bush administration. I have C-SPAN radio locally in Washington, D.C., and happened to catch a speech by one of George W. Bush's speechwriters, and he said, oh yeah, that Axis of Evil thing, well, we had Iran and we had Iraq on the list, and we didn't want to make it look like we were anti-Islam, so we added North Korea. And so North Korea's response to being added to that list was an immediate withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty and pursuit of a nuclear weapons program. And they've since tested 3 nuclear weapons. It was based on a Soviet research reactor that was given to them many decades ago. And in fact, many of the countries on that list of nuclear weapons states got there through either research nuclear or nuclear power itself. So another insurmountable risk is the risk of accidents. Again, this book was written in 2006, so the main examples at that time were 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. And of course, since 2011, we've seen the horror of Fukushima. on live television. To that risk of accidents should be added the risk of attacks. And one thing that doesn't get enough attention by any means, including by our own Nuclear Regulatory Commission in this country, is the fact that at least the reactors are inside some sort of containment structure. As we've seen at Fukushima Daiichi, which are, by the way, General Electric reactors, we have 23 identical reactors to Fukushima Daiichi in this country. The containments obviously got damaged or destroyed. There have been massive releases of radioactivity from those melted down reactor cores. So containments sometimes aren't good enough, but at least there are containments. Around the high-level radioactive waste storage pools, there is no containment. That's the case at Fukushima Daiichi right now. Those storage pools of high-level radioactive waste are open air. And so if they lose their cooling water, that waste can catch on fire, and it would dwarf what's happened at Fukushima thus far. That's a segue into the next insurmountable risk mentioned in this book, which is radioactive waste. We are actually 70 years into the atomic age. Enrico Fermi created the first high-level radioactive waste at the University of Chicago in 1942 as part of the Manhattan Project, the race for the bomb. And we still don't know what to do with the first cupful of high-level radioactive waste. As was touched on in the film, the illusion of a solution in this country for the past generation has been Yucca Mountain, Nevada, despite the fact that the Western Shoshone Indians with treaty rights to that land didn't want it. The state of Nevada didn't want it, and at this point are prevailing in their fight. But that fight is not over. House Republicans are still after the Yucca Mountain dump. And if the Republicans were to take the White House, if Harry Reid was no longer Senate Majority Leader, Yucca Mountain would be back on the table. And the danger there is that it is an earthquake zone, it's a volcanic zone, and even if the earthquake didn't happen, the volcano didn't happen out there, the site is going to leak massively into the environment. It would be a nuclear sacrifice zone for a long distance downstream and into the air, the leakage out of that proposed dump site. So that's their list of insurmountable risks. I would add, our group would add, the routine radioactivity releases from every stage of the uranium fuel chain, including uranium mining, which I've only seen this film once, but I don't think they talked a lot about uranium mining. And ironically enough, it's probably the worst health impact of the entire uranium fuel chain. It's ironic because it only gets worse when you start processing, enriching, especially when you split atoms in a reactor core. The fuel comes out of a reactor 1,000,000 times more radioactive than it went in. But even natural uranium is pretty nasty stuff. The decay products that come off it, things like radium and polonium, these are highly toxic radiological substances. And so uranium mining, which mostly takes place on indigenous peoples' lands around the world, has had huge health impacts on those communities, especially on the miners who die of lung cancer at very high rates in places like the Navajo Indian Reservation. So I mentioned a second book, and I'll end on this, pushing my 10 minutes already. This one was written by Dr. Arjun Makhijani himself the next year, 2007, and it's entitled Carbon-Free, Nuclear-Free, a Roadmap for U.S. Energy Policy. So they laid out why nuclear power can't help with this impending catastrophe called the climate crisis, and in their next book, they described what could make a difference. And despite the falsehoods presented in this film, Dr. Makhijani's thesis is that by the year 2040, nuclear power and fossil fuels can be completely phased out in the U.S. economy, all sectors of the U.S. economy, not just electricity, but transportation, heating, every sector of the U.S. economy. These dirty, dangerous, and expensive energy sources can be phased out and replaced with renewable sources, things like wind power and solar power in various forms. And energy efficiency is huge in that scheme as well. And no breakthroughs, no further technological breakthroughs are required to achieve this just 30 years from now. And in fact, we can do this for the same percentage of our gross domestic product as we currently spend on these dirty, dangerous, and expensive energy technologies. So there is a lot of good news from our perspective. 2013 has seen the most atomic reactor shutdowns in U.S. history in a single year, 4 in a single year, at Crystal River, Florida, at Kewaunee, Wisconsin, and 2 reactors at San Onofre, California. We're entering a very dangerous period with these old reactors. They are deep into their breakdown phase, and the risks of accidents at these old reactors is increasing as they get older. So I don't know, am I mispunched here? If I've hit my 10 minutes, I don't know if we're moving into just straight into Q&A or?
No, Sebastian, come on up. Sebastian, we wanted the debate, so we have to settle for Sebastian. So what can I say?
So, thanks for putting me up here. As you said, I am not an expert. I am doing research in nuclear physics, fundamental research in nuclear physics. So I'm not an expert in nuclear power per se, although I've followed this for 40 years. I am a fellow of the APS also, but I don't actually consider that as proof that I know more than other people about this particular subject. I also am not pro nuclear power in the sense that I already know the answer, that I am already totally my mind is already totally made up, and all I need to do is convince you that I'm right and the other side is wrong. In fact, I think this is really the problem when we discuss nuclear power and many other things, that people already have their mind made up, and that leads to the fact that they select information according to their pre-existing beliefs. So I give you one example. You've heard in this movie estimates for the number of deaths attributable to Chernobyl that range anywhere from less than 100 people total to million or millions, right? So, I mean, these two extremes, I think, are both equally laughable, because there is just no way, on the one hand, that you won't have a few, maybe even a few thousand cancer deaths eventually from the exposed population. On the other hand, there is also no way that you can have 1 million people disappear out of Europe and not be able to prove that that actually happened, right? That's also ridiculous. And I'm not saying this lightly. I mean, I actually was in Germany. I'm from Germany, so I got literally rained on by Chernobyl radioactive fallout. But the fact is that in spite of all our best efforts, we don't really have a reliable, believable, and universally believed model of how much radiation causes how much cancer, how bad is it really. There's a wide range of opinion. From up to a certain level, radiation is not only totally harmless, but maybe even good for you, like this man who buried himself in the black sands in Brazil, all the way to the assumption that at low levels radiation may be even more dangerous than at the levels. I mean, we know from Hiroshima that at some level, definitely radiation does cause cancer, but it is incredibly difficult because the numbers involved are so huge to prove this relationship at the much lower levels of radiation exposure that have happened ever since Hiroshima. And that includes Chernobyl, but certainly includes relatively benign accidents like 3 Mile Island and to some extent Fukushima. I mean, I'm not saying that the nuclear industry doesn't have any dangers at all, but compared with things like chemical industry, I remind you of Bhopal, or even very recently the train that derailed in Canada, or the fire in Texas. I mean, in this, unfortunately, practically all industries have certain risks associated with them, and nuclear is not an exception of that. I don't think it's actually all that dangerous, and it's certainly not as bad in terms of number of people killed per year as, for instance, coal or oil and so on. I just want to point out that there is actually some similarities between what most green people, including myself, hope for in terms of renewable energies and nuclear energy. I mean, for instance, both of them are successful in countries where they are heavily subsidized. Germany has by far the largest fraction of non-nuclear clean energy, and it's very heavily subsidized. There's a big role to play for the government in both cases, because we do, in spite of what you said, we do need research to improve a huge range of aspects, technological aspects of clean energy, but also, we already have this nuclear waste. It has to go somewhere, right? Even if we were not to build a single more nuclear power plant, it has to go somewhere. So we need research into that, but I do think that we also need research into advanced reactor projects. I mean, we are still trying to figure out how to use fusion, and I can tell you one thing already, it's not going to be a panacea either. I was pretty disappointed in the end of the movie, which just sounded like right around the corner of a brave new world, where the whole planet lights up. I actually find that very disturbing, being a hobby astronomer. I don't actually like that. I hope that will